Welcome back to Boys on Film. My name is Phil. I'm with Chris. We are feeling festive. Look at us. Look at that jumper. First question then for you, Chris. Are you dinging? Are you donging?
I normally would dong, but I'm more dinging today for sure. Absolutely.
I don't know whether that's a good thing. Is it a good thing? Surely it is.
I'm not going to answer that. My lawyer wouldn't let me answer that.
So we're talking about It's a Wonderful Knife. Can we just talk about the title first of all? It's a bit shoehorned, isn't it?
It is, and I've got to say that's the thing that continues into the film a little bit for me. But I've got to say, you know, it's not December yet, and I'm already wearing a Christmas jumper because watching the film made me feel Christmassy. I did feel quite Christmassy as a result of it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there was lots of Christmas lights. There were presents. There was a present opening. There was family get-togethers. So, you know, it felt very snowy and wintry, and it was a great location. Yeah. So,
it's a Christmas film, for sure. It made me feel like I got the Christmas vibe. I'm definitely feeling it.
So it's Winnie Carruthers, who's played by Jane Widdop, who was brilliant in... Did you see Yellow Jacket? She was great in that.
Yeah, she's great. I really like her. Really like her.
So she saves her town from a psychotic killer, a masked maniac, on Christmas Eve. I love how they're switching on the Christmas lights on Christmas Eve. I mean, surely it should have been done like 2-3 weeks before. But no, they decided to do it there and then.
That's a Christmas movie thing, though, isn't it? Don't they just compress the whole of the Christmas season into Christmas Eve in every Christmas film? Imagine. I mean, it happens in loads of them. And of course, if you sit there going, well, that's not real life, that's not what happens at Christmas, then you're like, you're Grinch, aren't you? So you have to go with it when you watch a Christmas film. You have to go
You've been watching the Hallmark Channel, haven't you, Chris?
It's not a channel I watch a lot of, to be honest, no. Really.
So Winnie wishes that she'd never been born. There's a scene where she's saying, oh, everything's going wrong, you know, life's falling apart. Does that little wish, and then all of a sudden, Northern Lights, the aurora's there, and yeah, it's almost like her wish has been granted. So, you know, flashbacks, obviously inspiration from It's a Wonderful Life. See what they did there with the title?
Good pun.
But is a knife wonderful? Is a knife ever wonderful? Unless you're like cooking really delicate food, I suppose it can be quite handy, but
don't try and bring reality into this film. That's not going to work.
We're not meant to think about it too much, are we?
We are not meant to think about it too much. There's a real danger if you do. But I've got to say, I mean, you talk about Winnie, but actually I really liked Justin Long's portrayal of was he a baddie? I guess I'm going to call him a baddie. You know, Henry Waters, the kind of, he becomes the mayor and he starts off as this kind of pseudo-industrialist who's kind of like basically taking over the town. He's the corporate baddie for sure. Yeah. But he's the hair and makeup and stuff are so good in it that you kind of you're going, I kind of know him. Who is it? And then you're like, oh God, who is that? Who is that? Who is that? And then it just comes to it, and like you go, oh my God, it's him. I recognize him from Jeepers Creepers. And I thought he was really funny in that role, actually, with the big teeth and the tan.
Oh my God, he was amazing. His eyes looked different as well. I don't know whether he was wearing contacts, but he did look totally transformed. He was almost like a Donald Trump figure, wasn't he? This kind of property tycoon.
Baddie. And I think you're right about the eyes, because when I don't want no spoilers, but when the town are under his spell a little bit, when he's doing this kind of Christmas Eve kind of gift, but bad, you know, have you been a bad kid or a good kid thing where he's handing out presents to people, and the whole audience are kind of rapt and they're kind of really held in his gaze, and they've all got the weird eyes as well. I think either that or my TV's on the blink, but I think everybody has
yeah, I know, I noticed that, especially the woman. Her eyes did change in the front row, so I don't know whether that was added after, maybe bad CGI.
Or maybe it was good because we didn't know whether it was CGI or not.
That's true. Yeah. So he plays Henry Waters. He's, like you say, the mayor, the town villain. I love how someone references him as being that spray-tanned prick. That was so brilliant. That made me lol.
There were a couple of lol moments, actually, and I really wish I could remember what they were now. But there are a couple of little wisecracks that people make in the script, and it's just kind of, you know, you do kind of laugh. But I've got to say, how many times did you jump watching this film?
There are a couple of moments where it was meant to be suspenseful, like when they're treading over the killer's body and all three of them are coming down from the stairs. Do you remember? And they're kind of, and it pans in on their feet, and you're almost meant to kind of expect him to jump. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it didn't make me feel tense. I mean, it didn't really scare me. It was
low on the jumpometer in this house, I've got to say. My husband jumps, you know, when people open doors in horror films generally, but he didn't jump once in this one. So, you know, I was expecting a bit more from it as a horror film. I mean, it was to be honest, on a scale of Christmas film, horror film, it was distinctly more Christmas film than it was horror film for me.
Yeah, especially the end. I mean, that finale is very upbeat, isn't it? I mean, as you would expect from a Christmas movie, it's got all the schmaltz, it's got all the Hallmark Channel niceties. I'm not going to say anything. I don't know. You know, it could be a bad ending. We don't know, but there are parts of that finale that are very smiley. But yeah, I think it kind of fell apart. I was really enjoying it up until probably the halfway mark. And then it went quite serious, and then there were no comedy moments because it was quite comedic. The first part of it, I thought they got the balance right. The action was great, the kills were great. It was all very wham bam, and it got into the action really quickly. But then I think the characters' story, the storylines, the plot was kind of forgotten about a little bit, almost like they'd become lazy with it, like they couldn't be bothered. I don't know what you think
about this. The elephant in the room for me is is it a tribute or a sort of reference to It's a Wonderful Life, or is it not? And for me, that just got a bit jumbled. I kept thinking it must be because of the title pun, and there are some elements of the plot which kind of are reminiscent, and you kind of think, oh, okay, it's a kind of tribute-y horror, remix of it. But it just trying to ram those two things together, actually just results in a bit of a mess to me. It just wasn't it could have been a clearer tribute-y sort of based on thing, or it could have just been a film in its own right. But actually, it was kind of neither. And that I totally get what you're saying about it being a bit of a mess, because it was a bit of a mess for me, script-wise as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it didn't really know what kind of film it wanted to be. I think it wanted its cake to eat it as well. I think it wanted everything, and sometimes it just didn't gel. Because I know it's directed by Tyler MacIntyre, who did Five Nights at Freddy's, which, I think critically was a bit divided this year. I think it got panned a bit, but it's a successful box office smash. Tragedy Girls he did as well, and I think it was written by the guy that did Freaky, which I quite enjoyed. Freaky, I didn't see that until recently. But yeah, it's half a good film, I think.
Yeah, it is.
It seems to take a lot of inspiration from slashers like Scream and Friday the 13th, even way back. But I think those Scream elements do work. I think the action scenes were pretty good, well executed. Yeah. I just think it just seemed to become a bit lazy halfway through.
I think it was quite a well-produced film, actually. I think it was well put to, technically and all that kind of stuff. And as you say, the jumps and the frightening bits are all really well done. The script let it down for me. It really did. But I've got to say, very 21st century, but LGBT representation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, full marks for that.
Very inclusive.
Various characters and relationships being depicted there in really inclusive ways, in really contemporary ways, that I thought was a really strong point, actually, because this is going to be a mass market Christmas / horror film, excuse the pun. And, a lot of people are going to see it. And, I think that kind of portrayal is clearly really important. And, especially for us on Boys on Film. So I enjoyed that, I've got to say. I thought that was a good, positive element of the film, for sure.
Yeah. Question for you, Chris. Bearing in mind the first probably 15 minutes of the film, there's a scene that involves a snowman. What would you do if you answered the door, the doorbell rang, and you answered the door and there was a snowman standing there?
I probably would ask him if he wanted a new carrot. Normally, of course, I'm very polite. I was very well brought up, so I would normally invite someone in. But a snowman, I don't want a snowman dripping on my carpet. So, no, he'd have to stay in the porch for sure.
It did look like a plastic one, though.
Yeah, well, I think well, no spoilers, but I think he was. I think that was the point. I think that the baddie was hiding behind the snowman. And they
spoilers.
There's a snowman at the door, and they were like, "No, there's no snowman at the door. It's a baddie." I think.
Should we talk about that baddie, the masked villain? Very angelic, bad angel, I suppose, but kind of reminiscent of, like I say, Scream.
Yeah.
That mask, though, I just kept thinking, how can you see where you're going? Because there were no eye holes. Am I just thinking too much? Am I just reading
there were
too
no
much?
eye holes, no, and I was blaming it on a sort of milky opacity, shall we say?
Yeah.
What that looked like, but I think there was a milky opacity on the man's face. You know, it was a scary mask, and the character was really scary. And you know, every time it appeared, you know, you were like, "Oh my god, something bad's going to happen." You know, not just because they were brandishing a big knife, but because of this kind of milky opacity. You know, so I think, yeah, scary baddie for sure, definitely.
And like I say, it does get into the action pretty quickly. I mean, the first 15 minutes, I mean, the titles don't come up until 15 minutes after, and the big reveal, you know, we find out who the killer is initially, which sets the ball rolling plot-wise. You know, the story kind of gets into it then. But then again, you know, that changes and there is a bit of a twist, and we kind of hark back to It's a Wonderful Life more, that kind of story, and it's it's more sweet and innocent, I suppose, in a way. So that for me did spoil it a little bit, because it felt a little bit shoehorned, like the title. It's 2 films for me. I would have given the first half 3 stars, but star rating for me is going to be 2, unfortunately.
I'm going to agree with you. You know, it just didn't know what it was. You know, it was suffering from an identity crisis, and you know, it just could have been tighter. You know, in terms of the writing, and you know, I think the acting, the performances are all really good. Well produced. It's just not a great script. You know, the concept was not as clear as it could have been. You know, is it this or is it that? You know, deciding what its USP was clearly you could see that they had a challenge with that in the production meetings, and you know, the finished result, I'm afraid, illustrates that for sure. Yeah.
But which is a shame, because I mean, like we said, terrific cast. Jane Widdop, Joel McHale is in this. He was in Community. Justin Long is brilliant, like you say, Jeepers Creepers, and more recently Barbarian. He was in that we loved. Yeah, so it's got that draw, isn't it? I think the cast, I think, will draw people in to watch it on Shudder.
Absolutely, I think you know, there's always going to be a market, especially in this house, for a Christmas horror film. You know, that I'm going to sit and watch a Christmas horror film because it's 2 things that I really love. So, you know, I'm always going to give those things a go, and I'd say to people, give it a go. You know, there might be something in it for you, but for me, it just got muddy. You know, it was just, the plot was all over the shop. You know,
I'm the same. I love Christmas and horror movies, both separately but also together. Christmas horrors are the best. Black Christmas remains my favourite, although it is very dark and dingy. Jeremy hates it for that reason. He bought me that on Blu-ray, so I have to keep watching it every year. But this, I enjoyed it to a certain extent, and like you, it made me feel Christmassy, so that's a good thing. That's definitely a tick there. But yeah, 2 stars ultimately. I was going to say, actually, I was going to mention when I sent you in the email saying, do you fancy reviewing this? And you said, when am I ever going to turn down a cheesy horror Christmas film? It's quite cheesy, isn't it?
And I'm glad that I said yes, because I'm glad I've seen a cheesy Christmas horror film now. Absolutely. Just don't think about it too hard. But yeah, I mean, you should never think about a Christmas horror film very hard. But this didn't really stand up under scrutiny, is the problem.
So it's called It's a Wonderful Knife, and it's available premiering on Shudder from the 1st of December. Go check it out. Leave a comment down below if you have seen it, what you think of it, whether you agree with us. I mean, we're just two
middle-aged men sitting here watching films, complaining about them.
Exactly. So, yeah. Don't take us too seriously.
You're fully entitled to your own opinion. Absolutely.
Don't take us too seriously, he says, wearing a Disco Santa jumper and ding dong. There you go. Have a fantastic Christmas. If I don't speak to you before, hopefully we will get another couple of Christmas horror films in, though.
Definitely. Happy Christmas to you, Phil. Happy Christmas to our viewers. And
yes.
Always remember to dong when you ding.